Back to the Sow's Chronicles. In the last two videos, I was grousing and complaining about irregular pleats. And again, I was being charitable, or I was forced myself to be charitable because I got to find out if I can do a better way before I start blasting other people's methods. But here we are with another kilt. This is in the McLean tartan, modern pellet. And once again, it's an alteration for a fellow. And I've come up against the same thing. And this isn't a large tartan. This is only about 8 inches, 8-inch set. But what do we find under the first deep pleat? Okay, there's 1, 2, 3. Here there's 1. And a deep one right there. And this isn't laid out like the last one's laid out symmetrically. It's like every 9 pleats, the 10th one would be stacked. This one is, okay, there's 3, and then we go over 3, we go over 4 pleats, and then we go 2 pleats, and that one's, okay, and here we are again, that's 3. That seems to be it. So, confusing. But by great good luck, I've got a father and son client. This is the kilt that I've altered to fit the father. And with this, I've just pressed it, and I just have to get the lining into it. But I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to set up on the tripod so you can see the kilt in the same tartan that I'm making for the son, because I've got a couple of teaching moments with it. Hey, I'm back with the McLean. And this is interesting because in a number of ways, because I'm finding by presenting and thinking about first of deciding to do these videos and explain stuff to you guys, I have to explain it to myself, which is a bit of a revelation because again, over 50 years in doing this, I've come to adopt a number of practices almost intuitively. I'm coming to the right solution, but possibly in hindsight, not consciously reaching them. So by explaining this, it's a bit of a not a wake up, it's a bit of a revelation for me too. So here we have the McLean cloth for the second kilt. You've seen the kilt, the father's kilt that I've just altered. This is the new cloth for the son's kilt. And having them together like this is actually a good teaching moment for me, because as I worked on the old one, I think I can predict the son's in his 20s, the father's, I think, in his 50s. If he's younger than that, he'll let me know, I'm sure. But I have a bit of a lesson right there on how a person's figure changes over time as it coarsens, because the father's kilt, he had it made when he was about his son's age, maybe a little bit older. And it seems they have just about the same measurements. The father was a 34 waist, 42 hip, which I've altered to his current measurements, which are 41 waist, 42 hip. The son is 33 waist, 42 hip. So I have a great opportunity here to plan for the future, which I always try to do, but this time I've got a little more evidence, a little more data to go by. So we can assume, because they're about the same height, I can assume, I think safely assume, that in 30 years' time, the son's figure is going to be rather like his father's. So 41, let's say 41, 42. So when I'm laying out for the aprons, I generally start at 50% of the waist. With this, I'm going to start out with 50% of the hips. So the son's front apron is going to be 21. I think I put it, yeah. 21, and the pleats therefore will be 13 inches at the waist and 21 inches at the hip. And the great thing, again, with this chart that I had you guys, or I invited you guys to complete for yourselves, the table of the pleat widths most often used in kilt making. It's in another video. If I remember, I'll include it in the link so you can draw this up for yourself, because this allows you to compress. It allows you to become a good deal more efficient in your time. So But I'm going to back up a bit. So I'm going to show you the steps that I've gone. So I decided 20 waist, 21 hip on the apron. Now, I measured the son at 22 inches, but his father was 23 inches and at the same height. So I think what I'm going to do for the son's kilt, I'm going to add that extra inch. I'm going to cut it to 23 inches as well. And then when he comes in for a fitting halfway through, if that 1 inch is too much, sure, I can take it off. But I think I'm inclined to perhaps leave it at 23 and possibly plan we'll see if that means I'm going to have to adjust the distance of the strap and the center of the strap and buckle up or down relative to the top of the kilt to fine tune the length of the thing. Because you remember, we can do that. If we take a strap and buckle and we lower it, we are effectively shortening the kilt. And by raising it, we're effectively lengthening the kilt. We've got plus or minus a couple of inches there. So there's something for me to try. In any case, yeah, 23 inches. I'm not sure if you can see my chalk lines, but I'm going to do them again. So twice 10, of course. So there's my waist measurement, 10.5 at my center line. There's my hip measurement, and that still gives me a full hand span at the end there for the fold and the fringe. Now, because I'm pleating to the set, if I was pleating to the stripe, I could precisely locate where that first pleat was going to be, and it'd probably be about there. And that's a deep pleat. That's almost 50%. Let's see what happens if I went to this line and I was pleating to the stripe. I would have a deep apron pleat, which is about almost exactly a quarter, and we want a quarter to a third. And frankly, better too deep than not deep enough. Right, so I kind of guesstimated there. That's almost 50%, but so I marked that as potentially the first repetition of the set. Because remember, I'm going to lay out, this is my method, I'm going to lay out the aprons and the pleats and then see how many repeats I get to find out where the center back of the kilt is going to be. So I've sort of made a provisional mark there, that little X, to say that that's where I'm going to start counting from. So I go to the other end of the cloth. I should have some. Okay. Now the inner apron, same thing. Come here, Mr. Chalk. Want to find a pin in a hurry? Stick your hand in where the pins are, and they're sticking out the ends of the thing. I've stuck myself so many times that my fingers don't even bleed anymore. Okay, so 23, and again, it's provisionally 22, but I'm going to give that extra inch, I think, right? So 23, and you can see my marks are already there, because when you're planning for instruction, you do your training, you check your training age. So there's 21, and a little less than a fathom right there. I'm marking the inner apron. It isn't marked to the same center as the outer apron, because by moving it to the opposite, shall we say, there's the strongest feature of the set, and there's this, I can say, the second strongest. I've moved it over that way because I'm giving myself just that little bit of extra cloth to play with in the middle of the kilt. So there we are, 20, 21, and a provisional, that's about a quarter right there. A provisional, that's about the same depth as the other side, which is not quite half, but a little more than a third. Now remember, when I mark it here, this isn't the first pleat. This is I have to think of a name for it. I can't, let's call it the foundation. I don't know. We'll come up with a more accurate term later, but this is not the first pleat, because the last pleat, because the last pleat folds over to meet the apron on top of that point. And again, the provisional mark I make is sort of an arrow, like in map and compass use when you're just marking north. And I've provisionally marked it there, which makes that the last pleat. So now I count the pleats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I'm just going to speed up and tell you that I counted, and I have 29 pleats, maximum number of pleats between the two aprons and the two apron, deep apron pleats. So 29, half of 29 is 14 and a half. So I counted from that notional first pleat. Remember I put the X. I counted back 14. I marked the 15th pleat as the center, or the 15th repetition of the set as the center. And then just to check that, I counted 14 from the other end, and that's still the center. If you wind up with an even number, you're just going to have to subtract one. A little harder to add one, but you're going to have to subtract one. So there's my center back pleat. Now, because, yeah, so I determined 27 pleats from a maximum of 29. Remember, we're not going to get 29 pleats when we're pleating to the set, because every time we mark a pleat, I don't know if you can see the chalk marks. You see there, centered on the green? Well, the next one's centered on the white. With each repetition, we move over one element of the tartan. So in 8 pleats, I should lose 1. That's the theory anyway. But I actually laid it out. Don't trust theory. Once you've found that center pleat, actually do a dry run, and maybe do it up on the top edge with your chalk. And you can do it a couple of ways. You can just mark here without going the whole length of the piece. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, to see if it works in practice, scaled down here. But you still want to do it a second time, where you actually mark, maybe not on your finished work, maybe on the top. So, and I'm going to do that right now. So the center. Now the next one is, I just decided I'm going to mark it centered on the white line. You can see the next element of tartan is broad black, narrow green, narrow black, broad green. So I'm going to center it on the narrow green. Now this, when you lay this out, this doesn't produce, it's not exactly to scale to the rest of the tartan, but it doesn't matter. It's proportional. It's not distorted. It's proportional, but it may be slightly larger or slightly smaller scale than the cloth, the unpleated cloth, but that's okay. I got a bit ahead of myself there, because again, I'm always doing this in a single take, aren't I? So I started with 29, maximum number of 29 pleats. I know I'm not going to get that. Initially I thought, well, okay, no, I don't think I'm going to get 27. I'm probably going to get 25. And sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes I'm going to get 23. Frankly, I don't know unless I actually try it empirically. So I tried it empirically, and it came to 27. Yay. So pulling up my sheet, I could see immediately that because I want 21 inches across at the seat. So 27, I just go down, and for 3/4, I get 20 1/4, which is close enough, because even just by altering or adjusting the seam by the width of a chalk line, I'm going to make up that distance. I want 13 at the hip, at the waist, so up 27, ½ inch will give me 13 1/2. That's within tolerances, and it took me that quick to determine my pleat widths. Half at the waist, 3/4 of the hip, done and dusted. There we are. Now, unlike the father's kilt, this, if we were to pin this up, we would see, and I'll show you later on in the process, that the pleats, of course, they're going to be regular across the front, but they're also going to be very nearly regular across the back. And eventually, I suppose, I'm going to have to pick apart one of those kilts where they've arranged the pleating so that every once in a while there's a bunch of pleats that seem to be either hidden under the one, or there seems to, 2 kilts ago, that was stacked 3 deep. I don't know why that is. I've been reluctant to really get in there and try to understand it, because I'm always afraid that I have this atavistic belief that crazy is catching, it's contagious. Anyhow, that's enough of me slagging other people's work. Now that I've laid out the aprons, I've proven to myself, and I've actually, as you can see this, I've done this both ways. In each, I've counted out 14 pleats from the center in each side. 1, 2, 3, I don't know if you can see the chalk marks. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 13 either side, isn't it? Because for 13 and 13, 26, middle pleat 27. So there's my 13th pleat here, which is just past where it's within the same set, shall we say. Remember, I marked that saying that was going to be my first pleat. I was right. There's my 13th pleat counting from the center, not including the center pleat. There's the edge of my front apron. I bring it over, and the front apron pleat I can feel is, there's my center. It's almost exactly a third, which is just great. Okay, now I'm going to check on this other end. See, here's the thing is, when you're starting out, and even when you're experienced, you can do this as many times as you want. Remember, it's not until you cut the cloth that things become irrevocable, right? So you can practice this as many times as you want. And if you get too many, if the chalk marks get confusing, because the moment you got duplicate marks, if you got 2 sets of marks, you're running the risk of making a mistake. Just if you're using wax chalk, just a press of the iron, the chalk is gone and you can start again. You can practice this as many times as you want. So there's my center pleat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to say right now, as I'm doing this, I'm also double checking to make sure that I'm not repeating, going to the same place, or doubling and skipping one and going to the next place. Because when you're starting off, and even after you're starting off, sometimes you'll find as you're sewing that you've skipped an element of the, you've skipped a pleat, or at least a place for a pleat. In this example, you've gone from the centered on the black there to centered on the green line here instead of that one. And you've made a mistake, and then you have to unpick it and go to the beginning. So I'm going to start from the beginning again. So center pleat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Good job I checked it, because I checked the other side. I didn't check this side. Now to find that center pleat, now see, I've made a mistake there, right? To find that center pleat, I'm accurately marking a pleat in this broad expanse of color. I mean, here I was able to center it on the black. Well, here I center on the black, I mark it, and there it is. And now, of course, my let's call it the marker pleat, the foundation. What were we going to call it? That's pretty much where I predicted it would be, didn't I? So there's the edge of my apron. I bring it over to there. My last pleat is going to be like that. And the apron pleat here, the deep pleat, is, it's about a quarter. It's maybe a little bit less than a quarter, which is fine. It's exactly what we want. Now, before I proceed, I'm going to check it one more time with the camera off. And then I'm going to take my iron, because we're starting to get confusing right here, right? I had done it, I predicted that my foundation, my meeting point, let's call it the meeting point. The meeting point, initially I predicted it was going to be there just by folding the cloth. And then I miscounted the other way and I decided it was actually here, but that's my 13th. That's my last pleat there. So as you can see, by striking it out, even in a different color chalk, it gets confusing. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over with an iron and I'm going to remove the confusing marks. Yeah, anything I put a strike through. And then from there, I'm going to carry on.